Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, November 7, 2024. President Joe Biden promises a peaceful and orderly transition to the next administration led by Republican President-elect Donald Trump, saying in a White House Rose Garden statement, "We accept the choice the country made, and you can't love your country only when you win." President Biden also offering words of encouragement to Democrats upset by Vice President Kamala Harris's loss, telling them setbacks are unavoidable, but giving up is unforgivable. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin sends a memo to troops about the presidential transition, writing the U.S. military will continue to be above politics and ready to carry out the policy choices and obey lawful orders of its next commander-in-chief. We'll hear from the Pentagon's Deputy Press Secretary and also from the State Department spokesperson on presidential transition preparations there. Federal Reserve cuts interest rates 0.25%. Fed Chair Jerome Powell is asked about suggestions from some Donald Trump advisors that he resign. He says he will not. Senator Tammy Baldwin, Democrat of Wisconsin, gives a victory speech now that her very close re-election race has been called in her favor by Associated Press. AP also calls the Pennsylvania U.S. Senate election for Republican challenger Dave McCormick over incumbent Democrat Bob Casey. But Senator Casey has not conceded, saying there are still more votes to be counted. Two other U.S. Senate races have not been called yet, Nevada and Arizona. And in the House, a few dozen races are still to be called, so no word yet on which party will control that chamber in the next Congress. Meanwhile, the 118th Congress lame duck session begins next week. We'll talk with political reporter Anthony Adragna about the agenda, which includes government spending, the defense policy bill, maybe judicial nominations. Story from USA Today, President Joe Biden vowed Thursday to ensure a peaceful transfer of power following President-elect Donald Trump's resounding election victory and told his supporters a defeat does not mean we are defeated. Biden, 2 days after his Vice President Kamala Harris lost the election to Trump, assured Americans that he accepts the result. Trump famously refused to accept his loss to Biden 4 years ago. That was the article from USA Today. President Biden spoke for about 6 minutes in the White House Rose Garden. In the audience was not just the media, but also White House staff and administration officials, including some cabinet secretaries.
It's good to see you all. Particularly good to see my granddaughter sitting in the front row here. Hi, Finn. How are you, honey? For over 200 years, America has carried on the greatest experiment in self-government in the history of the world. And that's not hyperbole. That's a fact. We're the people. The people vote and choose their own leaders, and they do it peacefully. And we're in a democracy. The will of the people always prevails. Yesterday, I spoke with President-elect Trump to congratulate him on his victory. And I assured him that I'd direct my entire administration to work with his team to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition. That's what the American people deserve. Yesterday, I also spoke with Vice President Harris. She's been a partner and a public servant. She ran an inspiring campaign, and everyone got to see something that I learned early on to respect so much, her character. She has a backbone like a ramrod. She has great character, true character. She gave her whole heart and effort, and she and her entire team should be proud of the campaign they ran. You know, the struggle for the soul of America since our very founding has always been an ongoing debate and still vital today. I know for some people, it's a time for victory, to state the obvious. For others, it's a time of loss. Campaigns are contests of competing visions. The country chooses one or the other. We accept the choice the country made. I've said many times, you can't love your country only when you win. You can't love your neighbor only when you agree. Something I hope we can do, no matter who you voted for, is see each other not as adversaries, but as fellow Americans. Bring down the temperature. I also hope we can lay to rest the question about the integrity of the American electoral system. It is honest, it is fair, and it is transparent. And it can be trusted, win or lose. I also hope we can restore the respect for all our election workers who busted their necks and took risks at the outset. We should thank them. Thank them for staffing voting sites, counting the votes, and protecting the very integrity of the election. Many of them are volunteers who do it simply out of love for their country. And as they did their duty as citizens, I will do my duty as president. I'll fulfill my oath, and I will honor the Constitution. On January 20th, we'll have a peaceful transfer of power here in America. To all our incredible staff, supporters, cabinet members, all the people who've been hanging out with me for the last 4 years, God love you, as my mother would say. Thank you so much. You put so much into the past 4 years. I know it's a difficult time. You're hurting. I hear you and I see you. But don't forget all that we accomplished. It's been a historic presidency. Not because I'm president, because what we've done, what you've done. A presidency for all Americans. Much of the work we've done is already being felt by the American people, but the vast majority of it will not be felt over the next 10 years. We have legislation we passed that's just only now just really kicking in. We're going to see over $1 trillion worth of infrastructure work done, changing people's lives in rural communities and communities that are in real difficulty, because it takes time to get it done. And so much more it's going to take time, but it's there. The road ahead is clear, assuming we sustain it. There's so much we can get done and will get done based on the way the legislation was passed. And it's truly historic. You know, we're leaving behind the strongest economy in the world. I know people are still hurting, but things are changing rapidly. Together, we've changed America for the better. Now we have 74 days to finish the term, our term. Let's make every day count. That's the responsibility we have to the American people. Look, folks, you all know it in your lives. Setbacks are unavoidable, but giving up is unforgivable. Setbacks are unavoidable, but giving up is unforgivable. We all get knocked down. But the measure of our character, as my dad would say, is how quickly we get back up. Remember, a defeat does not mean we are defeated. We lost this battle. The America of your dreams is calling for you to get back up. That's the story of America for over 240 years and counting. It's a story for all of us, not just some of us. The American experiment endures. We're going to be okay, but we need to stay engaged. We need to keep going. And above all, we need to keep the faith. I'm so proud to have worked with all of you. I really mean it. I sincerely mean it. God bless you all. God bless America. And may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
President Joe Biden in the White House Rose Garden. Donald Trump Campaign Communications Director Stephen Chung said of President Biden's call Wednesday to President-elect Trump and the invitation to come to the White House that Donald Trump looks forward to the meeting, which will take place shortly, and very much appreciated the call. More on the transition from today's White House news conference with the Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre.
The president said today that he's going to assist with the transition. Yeah. Has the Trump transition team been responsive? Have they taken the steps that need to be taken so far in order to ensure an orderly transition?
If you're talking about the MOUs that the transition teams need to sign, as of now, the Trump-Vance transition team has not yet entered the agreements with the White House and the General Services. Our Chief of Staff, Jeff Zients, reached out to the Trump Vance co-chairs. And so we're going to leave that line of communications open. We're going to be helpful here. We want to have an effective, efficient transition of power. And so we are ready to provide that. As you know, the president invited the president-elect, Donald Trump, to come to the White House. And so once we lock that in, we certainly will share that with all of you. But we're ready. We're ready to assist. We've been trying to be there and be ready to assist in any transition with this, obviously, this transition. And so we're going to reach out, have those conversations, and so I'll just leave it there.
Thanks, Karine. Does President Biden believe he could have won if he stayed in this race?
President Biden believes that he made the right decision when he decided to step aside and immediately endorsed the vice president. And you saw the party come behind her, support her, and he believed it was the right thing for the American people. He put himself aside. This was not about him. This is about what was right for the American people. And that's what he believes. He believes it was the right decision to make. And he's very incredibly proud.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at her news conference in the White House briefing room. NBC News reports that President-elect Donald Trump told NBC News in a phone interview on Thursday that one of his first priorities upon taking office in January would be to make the border strong and powerful. When questioned about his campaign promise of mass deportations, Trump said his administration would have no choice but to carry them out. Trump said he considers his sweeping victory over Vice President Kamala Harris a mandate to bring common sense to the country. That was from NBC News. This from Reuters. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told troops in a memo released on Thursday the Pentagon was committed to an orderly transition to the incoming administration of Donald Trump and that the military would not get involved in politics and was ready to carry out all lawful orders. During the interview last month, Donald Trump was asked if he was expecting chaos on Election Day, and he appeared to suggest the military could be deployed against citizens who oppose him. That was reporting from Reuters. The Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh opened up her news conference today on this topic.
Yesterday, in a message to the force, Secretary Austin emphasized that the department will make a calm, orderly, and professional transition to the next commander-in-chief. Secretary Austin reiterated that the U.S. military will stand ready to carry out the policy choices of its next commander-in-chief and to obey all lawful orders from its civilian chain of command, to defend the United States, our Constitution, and the rights of all American citizens. He also reaffirmed that the U.S. military will, quote, continue to stand apart from the political arena, to stand guard over our republic with principle and professionalism, and to stand together with the valued allies and partners who deepen our security, end quote. As the transition gets underway, the Secretary has expressed his deep pride and appreciation for the department's civilian workforce and for all the brave American troops stationed at home and deployed all around the world.
The Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh at the Pentagon News Conference. Reporter later asked her about that memo and if Secretary Austin was sending a message to the incoming Donald Trump presidential administration.
Are memos like that standard operating procedure? And
yeah, the Secretary has sent out memos to the force on occasion.
No, but in a transition, like neither of us were here 4 years ago. What was it necessary, and was that a message not only to the outgoing teams but the incoming teams?
I can't speak for during the previous administration. I can only speak for the Secretary. The Secretary, the President, members of the interagency, other secretaries, other cabinet secretaries have issued memos to their staffs before. It is not unprecedented. We've done that, whether it be with an election or, another major event. You've seen the Secretary issues memos to the force, including, some of his initiatives that he's rolled out, whether it's, in the bucket of taking care of our people. Those are things that go out to the force. So it's not unprecedented. This was a message that he wanted to clearly communicate to an apolitical military and one that is going to continue to serve the next commander-in-chief and other administrations down the road.
In that brief message, he seemed to be addressing serious concerns. He was very specific.
Which part?
Well,
Do you have more
a lot
specifics?
of it. When he's talking about a lawful transformation and the military is going to stay apolitical, it seems like this is a message not for the people in this building and people who are wearing uniforms, but the people who will be running the show from January 24th.
Well, the message was addressed to the force, so it was a message for the force here and all around the world where our forces serve. I think the Secretary also in his message to the force was conveying his deep appreciation for the military. He has served over 40 years in uniform. He understands deeply the contributions that the men and women in uniform provide every single day. He understands deeply the value that our civil servants provide every single day. I have had the amazing honor and privilege to work alongside some of these individuals, and they're going to continue to work with the next administration that's coming in. This was a message about the incoming team and the transition of power, and we're going to make sure that the Trump transition team, when they are ready to start that transition process, it is one that we are working with them on.
Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh at the Pentagon News Conference. Story from The Guardian. The U.S. foreign policy establishment is set for one of the biggest shakeups in years as Donald Trump has vowed to both revamp U.S. policy abroad and to root out the so-called deep state by firing thousands of government workers, including those among the ranks of America's diplomatic corps. Trump's electoral victory is also likely to push the Biden administration to speed up efforts to support Ukraine before Trump can cut off military aid, hamper the already modest efforts to restrain Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu in Gaza and Lebanon, and lead to a fresh effort to slash and burn through major parts of U.S. bureaucracy, including the State Department. Trump backers have said he will be more organized during his second term, often dubbed Trump 2.0. And on the day after Election Day, U.S. media reported that Trump had already chosen Brian Hook, a hawkish State Department official during the first Trump administration, to lead the transition for America's diplomats. That was reporting from The Guardian. Today, State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller discussed the transition at his news conference.
Over the past 2 days, Secretary Blinken has been meeting with people from across the department to discuss the work ahead of us over the next 74 days between now and January 20th. In those meetings, he has emphasized 2 points. First, the peaceful transfer of power is an essential element of our democracy that is vital to our nation's security. That's why it's so important for us to conduct a smooth, efficient, and professional transition process. To that end, the Secretary has appointed Ambassador Stephen Mull, a distinguished member of the State Department family, to coordinate these efforts on behalf of the department. Ambassador Mull will work with the President-elect's team to ensure as successful a transition as possible. Second, the Secretary has made clear that he intends to use his remaining time in office to make tangible progress on a number of critical issues, cementing our work in maintaining a free, open, prosperous Indo-Pacific, and ensuring we continue to win the competition we're engaged in with China, while responsibly managing the relationship between our two countries, ensuring that Ukraine is in the best position possible for success, and bringing an end to the fighting in Lebanon and Gaza while improving the delivery of humanitarian assistance, securing the release of all hostages, and preventing the further spread of the conflict. We have no shortage of work to do over the next 74 days, and we are determined to make the most of the time left. As the President said today, let's make every day count. That's the responsibility we have to the American people. And with that, Matt,
Hi.
You're up.
Okay, so to that end, has Ambassador Mull started?
Ambassador Mull has started his work on behalf of the department. He's here. He's been attending meetings, getting ready to coordinate the process. We have not yet had contact made by the Trump transition team. There's a process that they go through writ large that's run by the GSA, and then I think, as you know, they appoint agency review teams that interface with each agency. They have not yet done that with respect to the State Department. I can't speak to other agencies, but as soon as they do, we are ready to go and working with them.
Okay, because I took a stroll through the transition area and there was nobody there.
Maybe he was at lunch. I don't know. He's here. I was in a meeting with him this morning, so
Okay.
I can assure you he is here, hard at work.
Okay, but what exactly is he doing? No.
So-
If there's been no contact with the incoming transition team.
So we have been working on transition activities for some time now, even before he was appointed. What we do before the team is appointed, and we were doing this to get ready for either a Trump transition or a Harris transition, is to put together briefing materials, both on policy and procedures, and to get them ready and to try and anticipate questions that the incoming transition team will have and be ready to answer those as soon as they have an agency review team that comes into the building.
State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller at his news conference at the State Department in Washington. Russian President Vladimir Putin, begins an NBC News article, congratulated the president-elect on his victory during a rambling, hours-long press conference at a discussion club in the Black Sea resort of Sochi today. He said he was open to dialogue and ready to have discussions with Donald Trump, and that Trump's desire to facilitate an end to the crisis in Ukraine deserves attention. That's reporting from NBC News. Here's part of the Russian president's remarks, the translation coming from the news agency Telegraph.
What he said about his desire to rebuild relations with Russia, to facilitate an end to the Ukrainian crisis, I think this deserves attention at the very least. And I would like to take this opportunity to offer my congratulations on his election as President of the United States. And if he does what he has been promising, before the inauguration, if he makes a phone call, if he says, Vladimir, let's meet, I don't think it would be beneath me to call him myself.
Through an interpreter, Russian President Vladimir Putin today at a discussion in Sochi. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at a European Political Community Summit in Budapest, Hungary, got a reporter's question about the war in Ukraine and Donald Trump.
What does Donald Trump's win mean for Ukraine?
I think what it will mean for all of us is that you have a president who is experienced, who is extremely clear about what he wants. He will push us all to spend more on defense, and he's right on this. He was right. He got his way. We went to the 2%, thanks to his doing for a large part. But he will also force us to do more in the future. And when you look now at North Korea getting involved in Ukraine, delivering the latest state-of-the-art, state-of-the-art missile technology from Russia, the fact that China, Iran, North Korea and Russia are working together. This is a threat not only to the European part of NATO, but also to the United States mainland, but also to our partners like Japan and Republic of Korea. I have to go in.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at a European summit in Budapest. It was also attended by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. A Wall Street Journal article about the competing proposals that advisors are suggesting to President-elect Donald Trump about the war in Ukraine has these paragraphs. The proposals all break from President Biden's approach of letting Kyiv dictate when peace talks should begin. Instead, they uniformly recommend freezing the war in place, cementing Russia's seizure of roughly 20% of Ukraine, and forcing Ukraine to temporarily suspend its quest to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. One idea proposed inside Trump's transition office, detailed by 3 people close to the president-elect and not previously reported, would involve Kyiv promising not to join NATO for at least 20 years. In exchange, the U.S. would continue to pump Ukraine full of weapons to deter a future Russian attack, part of a Wall Street Journal article. This is Washington Today. From ABC News, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates by 0.25 percentage point on Thursday, setting the latest path for borrowing costs just 2 days after the victory of President-elect Donald Trump. The move comes 2 months after the Fed cut its benchmark interest rate 0.5 percentage point, dialing back its years-long fight against inflation and delivering relief for borrowers saddled with high costs. That was from ABC News. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell announced it at a news conference at Fed headquarters in Washington.
My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. The economy is strong overall and has made significant progress toward our goals over the past 2 years. The labor market has cooled from its formerly overheated state and remains solid. Inflation has eased substantially from a peak of 7% to 2.1% as of September. We are committed to maintaining our economy's strength by supporting maximum employment and returning inflation to our 2% goal. Today, the FOMC decided to take another step in reducing the degree of policy restraint by lowering our policy interest rate by 0.25 percentage point. We continue to be confident that with an appropriate recalibration of our policy stance, strength in the economy and the labor market can be maintained, with inflation moving sustainably down to 2%. We also decided to continue to reduce our securities holdings.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell at his news conference in Washington. And Wall Street reaction to the interest rate cut, the Dow down a fraction, NASDAQ up 285, S&P up 44. New York Times has an article, Donald J. Trump spent his first presidency attacking the Federal Reserve, pushing policymakers to cut interest rates and calling Fed officials names that range from boneheads to enemy. That rhetoric is likely to make a return to the White House with Mr. Trump. The Republican has been promising that interest rates will come down on his watch, even though rates are set by the politically independent Fed, and the president has no direct control over them. The question looming over markets and the Fed itself is whether Mr. Trump will do more than just talk this time as he tries to get his way. The Fed is in the process of cutting rates, but it is unclear whether it will do so fast enough to please Mr. Trump. That was the article from the New York Times. Back to Fed Chair Powell's news conference today, he was asked about the impact of the election.
Given the expectation that the election outcome will produce policies that would meaningfully impact the U.S. economy next year, how is the committee taking these proposals into account for upcoming decisions, including potentially the next one in December? And can you give us any more sense of how proactive or reactive the Fed is prepared to be to changes in economic policies with the next administration?
Sure. So let me say that in the near term, the election will have no effects on our policy decisions. As you know, many things affect the economy, and anyone who writes down forecasts in their job will tell you that the economy is quite difficult to forecast looking out past the very near term. Here, we don't know what the timing and substance of any policy changes will be. We therefore don't know what the effects on the economy would be, specifically whether and to what extent those policies would matter for the achievement of our goal variables, maximum employment and price stability. We don't guess, we don't speculate, and we don't assume. Now, just in principle, it's possible that any administration's policies or policies put in place by Congress could have economic effects that over time that would matter for our pursuit of our dual mandate goals. So we, along with countless other factors, forecasts of those economic effects would be included in our models of the economy and would be taken into account through that channel.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell at his news conference in Washington today. Another reporter asked him whether, if asked, would he resign.
Hi, Victoria Guida with Politico. Some of the president-elect's advisors have suggested that you should resign. If he asked you to leave, would you go?
No.
Can you follow up on, do you think that legally you're not required to leave?
No.
Jerome Powell was first appointed by President Donald Trump for a first term, served 2018 through 22, then reappointed by President Biden, and his current term expires May 15th, 2026. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Visit cspan.org/results for comprehensive coverage of the 2024 campaign results. Get the final Electoral College breakdown in the presidential race and see which states each candidate carried. Dive into our interactive maps to explore the outcomes in Senate, House, and governor's races and monitor the final balance of power in Congress. Plus, watch acceptance and concession speeches on demand, anytime. Stay up to date with C-SPAN, your unfiltered view of politics at cspan.org/results.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Associated Press out of Madison, Wisconsin writes, Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin pledged during her re-election victory speech on November 7th to work with President-elect Donald Trump when possible, but she also vowed to fight him to protect the national health care law and abortion rights. Baldwin narrowly won re-election to a third term over Republican businessman Eric Hovde, who was endorsed by Trump. Hovde has yet to concede in a race where the margin is so close he could seek a recount. Baldwin said to a room of supporters at a steamfitters union training center, "We deserve politics with less vitriol, less division, less hatred, and fewer lies. Actually, no lies." That was reporting from Associated Press, which called this race yesterday. She gave the speech today. Here is part of it.
From the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you to the people of Wisconsin for putting their trust in me to continue to be their fighter in Washington, D.C. The way we won this race is the way I've always approached this job, and that is we did everything, everywhere, all at once. I traveled to red, blue, purple, rural, suburban, urban parts of our state. I listen to people. I really listen to people, and then deliver for them. And in turn, these Wisconsinites showed up for me. And I'm so grateful. You know, it's the farmers and the dairy industry who I've fought alongside, earning the endorsement of the Wisconsin Farm Bureau. Yeah. It's the workers on foundry floors who are getting more business because of my Buy America rules. And a big shout out to labor. It's the LGBTQ families who saw through the nasty attack campaigns and knew that I had their backs to live their lives free of hate or discrimination. And it's the women who've had our rights stripped away and saw me on the front lines fighting for their freedoms. And while I am overjoyed at this victory, I have to acknowledge the results of the presidential race. While we worked our hearts out to elect Kamala Harris, I recognize that the people of Wisconsin chose Donald Trump, and I respect their choice. You know that I will always fight for Wisconsin, and that means working with President Trump to do that and standing up to him when he doesn't have our best interest at heart.
Senator Tammy Baldwin, Democrat from Wisconsin, in Madison, Wisconsin, her victory speech as she has won a third term. Back to the Associated Press article, Senator Baldwin defeated Eric Hovde by just under 29,000 votes, a margin of 0.9% based on unofficial results. State law allows for the race losers within 1 percentage point of the winner to seek a recount, but Hovde has not yet said whether he will do that. Hovde's campaign did not immediately respond to a request for comment. On November 7th, Hovde would have to pay for the recount and would have to request it within 3 days after the last county completes its canvass of the vote. Those are due by November 19th, but counties could complete it sooner. Reporting from Associated Press. AP Today also projected Senator Angus King, independent of Maine, has won re-election to a third term. King was challenged by a Republican as well as a Democrat, and there were third-party candidates in that race. The issue was not whether Senator King got the most votes, but whether he received over 50% in the multi-candidate field that's required in Maine's ranked choice voting system to win on the first round. Again, AP called it today. On Wednesday, when a local newspaper had projected his victory, Senator King spoke in Brunswick, Maine.
I've already heard this morning from a number of my colleagues, including several Republican colleagues who are looking forward to working together to try to move forward with a positive agenda for the country. I really am not ready to discuss what we're looking at in terms of control of the Senate or the House. I understand the House is still up in the air. Of course, Donald Trump has been elected president, and we will go forward and work together to try to further the interests of those people that I've heard in Maine. I know that the Republican candidates who were running and were elected yesterday were hearing the same things I was hearing. Housing, cost of living, border, all of those issues are issues that we're going to be addressing in the new Congress. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues just as I always have. I believe now more than ever it's going to be more important for people to be able to work together. One of my colleagues this morning in a conversation said, this is the time when small groups of us are going to have to try to get together to solve problems. So that's exactly what I intend to do. And I look forward to the results, and we've all had a long night, but the numbers have hovered right around where they are now, 52, 53%, and that's where it looks like it's going to land. And I do give credibility to the Bangor Daily News. They've been in this business for a long time, and they've apparently, my understanding is, have a complicated mathematical model that has determined that I'm going to emerge from this election with more than 50%, in the first round.
Senator Angus King, independent from Maine, who caucuses with the Democrats in the Senate on Wednesday in Brunswick, Maine, after a local newspaper said he had won re-election. Today, Associated Press made that determination. For the next Congress, the current U.S. Senate party breakdown, 53 Republicans, 43 Democrats, 2 independents who plan to caucus with the Democrats, Senator King and Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. There are 2 races yet to be officially called, Nevada and Arizona. Today in Pennsylvania, AP called that race, and that's included in that breakdown just mentioned, as Republican Dave McCormick beat incumbent Democrat Bob Casey, but Senator Casey has not yet conceded. Senator John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, currently the minority whip, is running to be majority leader against 2 other announced candidates, John Cornyn of Texas, Rick Scott of Florida. Senator Thune was interviewed today on CNBC.
Were you surprised at all about the breadth of the win for Republicans and for President Trump, former President Trump, President-elect Trump?
Yeah, right, Joe. I think going into it, if you looked at the polls, obviously everybody expected a tight race, but it was a very convincing, resounding win for President Trump, and literally up and down the ballot. And we outperformed 2020 in 48 states and across all demographic groups, and actually did better in 2,300 countries or counties, I should say, around the country than we did 4 years ago. So this was I think, an example that the American people have said enough is enough with the Biden-Harris agenda. They're ready for a different direction for the country, and I think it's really about open borders and high prices. I think those are the issues that animated voters to get out, but it gives us I think President Trump and Republicans in Congress, and hopefully we get not only the Senate but the House, a mandate to do some really good things for this country with respect to the economy and energy and the border and national security. I think those are the issues that we're going to be focused on, and hopefully we'll be able to make some progress and some headway with the coalition, the much broader coalition that's been built out since this election.
Senator John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, candidate for Senate Majority Leader in the next Congress, interviewed this morning on CNBC. In the U.S. House, there is no final determination which party will be in the majority, as the current party split is 210 Republicans, 198 Democrats, 27 seats still to be called, according to the Associated Press. The post-election lame duck congressional session begins next week, and joining us now to talk about the agenda for the remainder of the 118th Congress before the 119th is sworn in January is Anthony Adragna, congressional reporter with Politico. Thanks for being with us. I guess the big item is government spending. How does the election results affect what this Congress might do?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think the key question here is going to be how far Republicans want to extend government funding. I don't think they're going to be in much of a deal-making mode. They view the election as a mandate for them to enact a Republican-led agenda in the new Congress. They're not going to be looking to give Democrats much in the way of any sort of victory to close out the year. I expect that to carry over to government funding as well. I think they're going to look for a punt. Democrats may, of course, try to fight that, but a punt does seem like a continuing resolution is the form of that punt. Seems like the most likely solution here to me.
The current government funding runs out in December. Does that mean they would just do it a number of weeks or a couple of months and let the incoming Congress and President Trump actually handle the current fiscal year?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the question, and we've seen this be resolved differently with various prior switches in administration. Part of the calculation in the past has been to buy the new president some time to staff up their administration. There will obviously be a number of important cabinet positions that will need to be confirmed by the Senate in the early opening days of the new Congress. So I think that's sort of the open question. You know, how much time would you like to give the President-elect Trump to fill out his cabinet, and how much longer after that would you kind of tee up the first government spending battle? Republicans, I should mention, obviously have already laid out an aggressive 100-day agenda in which they're hoping to use this process known as budget reconciliation to advance tax policy, energy policy, things of that sort. So they may want to push a government funding fight as far down the line as possible to allow them to use the opening days in power for that fight.
Some other big ticket bills that they usually finish up by the end of the year, the defense authorization bill, and because we're in that cycle, the farm bill. What have you heard?
Yeah, it certainly seems like prospects for the farm bill are pretty bad right now. They seemed quite far apart when they left Congress. I wouldn't expect, again, this sweeping Republican victory in November to result in any sort of compromise to come together. You know, the one complicating factor there is the outgoing Senate Agriculture Chair, Senator Debbie Stabenow, is retiring and may want to try to get that done. So maybe we'll see one last push on that front. NDAA is usually something that happens every single year. I wouldn't see a reason that would change, but that could become a vehicle and a magnet for all sorts of other provisions. And as we know, that just makes it harder to get something done in the waning days of any Congress.
We're talking with Anthony Adragna from Politico. What about judicial nominations? This is the last chance for a Democratic president and a democratically controlled Senate to get those through. Can they do it?
Yeah, I think I'd expect Democrats to throw everything at the wall here. They recognize as well as anybody that a Republican-led Senate and now a Republican president means this is their last chance to get a lot of these judicial vacancies through for quite some time. They want to clear the decks to the greatest extent possible. I'd expect them to use a large amount of floor time in December to process these nominations, whatever is on their table.
You wrote an article in September, way before the election, previewing what the lame duck session might look like. It has this paragraph: lame ducks can sometimes serve as a pressure release valve for bipartisan legislative priorities that get caught in election year snarls. You write there's a host of possible bills in that category, such as rail safety, online child safety, marijuana banking bill, and various efforts to speed up federal permitting for energy projects. Any chance any of those can get through?
I think that is the $64,000 question, if you will. Certainly, I think, again, the Republican electoral victory and success doesn't tend to lend itself well towards bipartisan clearing of the decks. We've heard some House leadership objections to the online safety privacy bill that you mentioned. But certainly anything's possible. One area that I would perhaps look for some action would be an artificial intelligence. That's been a key priority of Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. And there have been talks of trying to reach some sort of compromise that could be processed before the end of the year. We'll have to see if that comes together, but that does seem like the sort of area where it might be able to break through even in this incredibly polarized political environment.
And finally, we've been talking about bills that started in Congress. Are there any White House priorities that they might try to push through the last few weeks of the Biden administration?
Yeah, it would be looking for them to try to outline something with regard to disaster assistance in terms of priorities there. I'm sure that's some assistance and relief that they'd like to see get to those communities that have been impacted by recent severe weather events. We'll also have to look at foreign policy. If there's another ask for additional assistance for Israel, we'll see if there's another ask of assistance for Ukraine. I think that's probably got really long odds now, again, given how Republicans performed at the ballot box. But certainly anything foreign policy related could be an area where we look for the Biden administration to make a final push before the end of this Congress.
Anthony Adragna, congressional reporter with Politico. Find his articles at politico.com and on X at Anthony Adragna. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And when the House and Senate return next week, you can always follow them gavel to gavel on the C-SPAN networks. The House is on C-SPAN television, the Senate on C-SPAN 2, both on the C-SPAN Now mobile app, which is free, and streamed at cspan.org. In the days after Tuesday's elections, there's been a lot of analysis of the results. On Wednesday, the Faith and Freedom Coalition held a news conference at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. Republican pollster Glenn Bolger, Public Opinion Strategies co-founder and partner, spoke about religion and this year's presidential race between Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Kamala Harris.
Those who are either Catholic or Protestant, overall, Trump was plus 10, 54-44. She was minus 15. So you had a 25-point delta, and that's 3 out of every 4 voters. Protestants, the gap's even bigger. Trump plus 19, she's minus 23. And then among Catholics, he's plus 14, she's minus 17. So even then, it's a 31-point difference between the two. And then those who say, no, I'm not religious, you have Trump minus 57 and her plus 44. And when you look at data like that, you understand why Democrats have problems with religious people, voters. They just don't have much of that in their coalition. Not saying they don't have any. They do. But they don't have that much of it, so they don't talk to those people that often. They don't hear from them that often. And that makes it really hard for them to connect with them. And then by church attendance, those who attend church weekly or even more frequently, Trump was a plus 19, is a plus 19. She's a minus 25, so 44-point difference. 47-point difference among those who go monthly. Not much of a difference between the two differences, 44 and 47. That's statistically within the margin of error. And then those who either go yearly or never, the numbers flip. She's got a plus 15 image, and Trump is at a minus 24 image. And then among white born-again evangelical Christians, which we have 19% of the sample, you can see just how big a gap there is. Trump is a plus 51. She's a minus 61. There's not too many groups where there's a 112-point difference in the image. So Harris just was not trusted, not well liked among white evangelical Christians. And Trump, 24% unfavorables is not a small number, but the 75 number is very powerful.
Glenn Bolger is a Republican pollster and with Public Opinion Strategies, co-founder and partner, speaking at the Faith and Freedom Coalition News Conference at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday. One of a number of post-election analysis events that C-SPAN has been covering, and you can find them all at our website, cspan.org. And the Donald Trump campaign putting out a statement today. The 45th and 47th President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump, announced today that Susan Summerall Wiles, the winning campaign manager for President Trump's highly successful 2024 campaign for president, will be named President Trump's White House Chief of Staff. Fox News article calls Susan Wiles a veteran Republican political operative. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal, our live forum involving you to discuss the latest issues in government, politics, and public policy from Washington and across the country. Coming up Friday morning, Semaphor's Dave Weigel and NBC's Scott Wong analyze the political implications of unified GOP control of the executive branch, the Senate, and potentially the House. C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Join in the conversation live at 7 Eastern Friday morning on C-SPAN, C-SPAN Now, or online at cspan.org.